Electrocast.
Hold on to your butts.
We are changing the course of history as we see it. That is what Wesley demands.
Now this affects Iris. Iris, where are you?
What you feel only matters to you. I do not entertain hypotheticals. The world as it is vexing enough.
Iris, I have a tip for you.
Don't take drugs!
Or whatever movies with Wesley and Iris.
What up and welcome to James Cameron Month on Or Whatever Movies. I'm your co-host Iris and I'm here with my older brother,
Wesley.
And we wanted to kick it off with a doozy, 1989's The Abyss.
James Cameron's The Abyss. James Cameron, director of Titanic and Avatar. Was there ever a moment in time where he was James Cameron, director of The Abyss?
I mean, it was a big Hollywood movie, but ultimately kind of a flop, right? Or kind of a disappointment, maybe is a better way to put it.
You know, I think I came to the James Cameron game relatively late. I remember a friend gushing about Aliens, and I was like, Aliens was okay. It wasn't Alien or whatever, but I really came on board with Terminator 2. I was, pretty young. The Abyss is in the middle somewhere. I wondered in revisiting The Abyss, because it has been so long since I've seen it, that maybe I would come at it with a new appreciation. And that took a while to come around.
It took a while to come around because this is a hella long movie?
It was a hella long movie, not as long as frickin' The Batman. But, I mean, The Abyss is not like it's languishing or it's a slow setup. They get right into it. Like, immediately we're in the middle of the action with the sub sinking.
Yeah. In the cold open.
Yeah, Titanic on a small scale with the bulkheads just being compromised and water rushing in. And you kind of have some hope, right? Are we killing people right off the bat in a James Cameron film? Apparently we are.
We do, but you can definitely see all of the learnings that he had working with water in The Abyss, right? With actors, I mean, there was literally one shot with Ed Harris, like running down a hallway. What do you call hallways? And like
the corridor or the gangway or something?
Yeah. And the water is rushing behind him and kind of overtakes him, just like it does, Jack and Rose in Titanic. Like, you can see how this was a great training ground for him and his opus, Titanic.
Right. When the water comes rushing down the hallway in Titanic and starts bursting open doors and things, all CG. I mean, maybe the doors were CG.
Oh, that was CG? That was amazing.
Ed Harris was getting hammered by real water. Like, we weren't in a place in 1989 where we could convincingly do the water effects. I mean, even Titanic looks a little bit dated now, and The Abyss avoids a lot of that. It avoids looking dated because he just threw people in the water and drowned them in their helmets and stuck rats in this pink solution, and it only looks cheesy and dated when we get to the stuff we've seen improved upon later, the water tentacle thing, the Russian water tentacle thing, and then the batteries not included style floaty orbs and benevolent aliens. I do want to say that the water tentacle, when I said that it had been used better in other places, of course, this was a training ground for Terminator 2. The original script for Terminator had a metallic Terminator, and James Cameron decided that the technology wasn't up to snuff, so he went with a traditional Stan Winston exoskeleton, big giant metal man Terminator. And then obviously revisited that concept for Terminator 2 after the proving ground for the technology in The Abyss.
Well, it sounds like it's worth underscoring that technology, cinematic technology, has either been keeping up with or has been created to accommodate James Cameron's imagination. It seems like, in addition to James Cameron kind of moving the whole technological aspect of cinema forward with his imagination, this film in particular, The Abyss, was an important step on his evolution as a filmmaker for arguably his best films, Terminator 2 and Titanic.
And that's the point. Even The Abyss stands as a hallmark for moving special effects forward. And it was a tried and true James Cameron formula. They're going to be roughnecks and rough-edged dudes, and then the queen bitch of the universe is going to come striding in her heels and kick people around and stuff. And his female characters have become not more refined, but more rounded. It's not just everyone hates her and then everyone loves her. There's a middle ground. the abyss is basically alien in a way, right? And it speaks to aliens which came before this, but they are a crew of roughneck types who follow a beacon to a derelict craft in an otherworldly environment.
Yep.
And luckily for them, the aliens aren't quite so menacing.
Yeah, they literally encounter an alien species.
Right.
Thankfully, a nice one.
And they have the guy in the hat who's like comic relief, the Beastie Boy who's super worried about his rat. And
the guy in the hat.
The idea that in the end, this whole thing is going to blow up kind of vibe that they're racing against to save humanity, I guess. Some parallels there.
Yeah, plus Michael Biehn.
Michael Biehn, yeah, who's I guess he's the Ash character in Alien, where he goes buggo ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio says, 1 in 20 people or whatever go buggo, I was like, well, someone's going buggo, because I hadn't seen this movie since I was a kid. And I really hoped it was going to be Ed Harris, because Ed Harris makes an amazing, wonderful bad guy. Michael Biehn and his little mustache, I wasn't sure about, but okay, because he's tough and buff and oiled up and scary looking. He also is kind of like a Jamie Bamber Battlestar Galactica pretty boy type. At least this early in his career. So, all right, convince me, because the mustache isn't doing it.
The mustache covered up his distracting lip thing, Michael Bihn's Felicity Jones mouth. Like, this was kind of the precursor role to his cowboy role in Tombstone, where he's just kind of like a restrained but ultimately terrifying and menacing bad guy.
Yeah, as Johnny Ringo. I don't think of him as a bad guy. Come to think of it, he has played a number of bad guys' roles, but he will always be Kyle Reese to me. And we have a cowboy character in this movie, too. The tomboy girl who's like all loud and brash wearing the Bret Michaels straw cowboy hat.
Oh, yeah, One Night.
Yeah.
She was a lot of fun, and I loved her moment when she stood up to Michael Biehn. It was so powerful and awesome.
She's tough. She's a James Cameron tough lady.
James Cameron does love the tough ladies.
And in the case of Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, it's her rig, and she'll be damned if anybody messes with her rig. Some alien stuff. She was kind of the Ripley, I guess, maybe just hair. But then there was aliens stuff as well, where the rig is compromised, and then the queen comes. I guess it's the wrong kind of queen. These are better, nicer aliens.
There were some nice touches and attention to detail for her character. Like, she comes in the heels, but she's immediately in her coveralls or whatever her work attire was. I forget exactly. And she obviously knows her way around the ship. Some real nice moments for the evolution of their relationship and them coming back together. But the one I wanted to focus on specifically was when she's dead. And Bud's trying to...
Spoiler.
And Bud's trying to resuscitate her, and it just fits so nicely in the story that he not only will he not give up on her, but he knows that she'll never give up. And it makes what is an otherwise pretty unrealistic situation kind of believable for me, where I was like, if someone's going to come back, it's going to be her, because she has the fight in her and the willingness to live. And then he goes all crazy on her and starts calling her a bitch and slapping her dead face. And then she comes back, and I was like, ah.
I think that these are the touches that make James Cameron a good filmmaker. They are big moments, memorable moments, hugely dramatic moments that cost $0. They had the whole exchange about, you got to do it and you got to let me die. And it made otherwise like what would have been just a general, like, hold your breath, going to make it. Oh my God. And like relying on score and things. Is she going to make it to the pool? We knew that she was going to die. They had a very long, intense conversation before doing it. And then with her death scene and trying to resurrect her, that was like 3 minutes or something or more of screen time, where nothing really happens. Like, he's just like yelling and hammering at her chest and slapping her around. And it's really emotional. That requires zero budget or zero special effects to carry it along. I don't know that if it's nuanced storytelling, but it's definitely keeping us in the moment and focusing on things that are important for the movie. It's kind of like the idea of watching the little blip sensor, beep, beep, and there are hordes of aliens coming. And all we have is that one insert shot of the little thing. We're focused on their faces and the minutia, and Ed Harris can be sailing down 3 or 4 miles below the surface in his rat water mask, And like all we can see is his eyes, and he's like in a swimming pool, right? And they're filming him, and then James Cameron's yelling through a megaphone or whatever he's got to be like, make your eyes crazy, make it like you're drowning. And a lot of really close suspense that substitutes for spectacle and budget. I mean, this is when The Abyss got really interesting for me. I was like, is she gonna make it? And then a sign that I was invested was my annoyance at how they pulled off the drowning swim, right? They all knew to oxygenate their blood as much as possible.
Why wasn't she hyperventilating?
I don't know. And then you take the deepest breath possible, so you die. So you die on the way, and that way your brain is deficient, is denied oxygen for only 3 minutes instead of 6 minutes or whatever it was.
They also deliberated for a long time about this.
But he waited until she died and then screamed and yelled before dragging her along.
And you're like, move!
Move! And the water's creeping up their faces. It's tense and it's effective. It's not 100% the way I would have done it.
I mean, assuming that you had your reasoning and logic intact and all your faculties, involved in your decision making. Like I gave Bud a bit of a pass that, he was kind of so in shock that he waited, but I definitely was like, what are you waiting for? Like, swim your heart out. Go!
Ed Harris is the man, and Ed Harris is great at exactly this kind of role, this super steely intensity at this sort of military / roughneck kind of role. If you recall, he had another standoff with Michael Biehn a few years later, 5 years later in The Rock. That was kind of a reunion. And I wondered, Ed Harris seems like the ideal person to anchor James Cameron's movies. He's like the hardline guy who seems like he could be a Terminator opposite Michael Biehn. Why wasn't Ed Harris in more James Cameron movies?
I'm surprised because James Cameron seems so loyal to his actors.
Yep, and reusing everybody.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it takes a couple cycles, but multiple appearances for Michael Biehn, Sigourney Weaver, now Kate Winslet with the Avatar sequels.
So who is the James Cameron regular among the cast of The Abyss?
Other than Michael Biehn?
Well, that's it. It's really Michael Biehn. And when you think about Michael Bihn's character, he had to look intense, and he had to have that mustache, and he was greased up a little bit. And that's kind of it. He was bad guy on the ship. He never had to make daring swims, never had to deal with outrunning the water, crushing him from behind in the gangway or anything, right?
Yeah, he had one throwdown with Bud.
Right, but that's a standard blocked fight, and they're in the water and stuff, and most of the time he was dominating Bud in that fight, so he didn't have to fly around in the water or anything.
Right.
The point I'm making is that Michael Biehn had it relatively easy on the set of The Abyss, and Ed Harris to this day still will not fully disclose everything he went through on the set of the Abyss. I mean, the whole cast had crazy names. This is James Cameron maybe at the highest, not going to say abuse of his powers, but flexing his determination to get a movie that's really difficult to make. I mean, Titanic above water a lot of the time was a logistical nightmare. This is underwater, in the water, in things under the water, and there were a lot of problems. James Cameron almost drowned, Ed Harris almost drowned, and it was very, very dangerous. And supposedly Ed Harris punched James Cameron in the face after his disregard for his safety, in which Ed Harris feels he almost drowned. They called it Son of Abyss, the abuse, life's abyss, and then you die. Because of James Cameron's notorious drive for perfection, people, his cast on The Abyss, do not look back on this movie fondly. And as such, no one really carried over except for Michael Biehn, who I think it had it a little bit easier. Even Kate Winslet, who made no secret of the fact that James Cameron was very hard on her as a 18-year-old, 19-year-old girl, didn't work with him again for 20 years before she showed up on the set of Avatar 2. So, relentless drive in perfection and in dangerous conditions that are really hard, The Abyss seems to take its toll on people. I don't know if that negatively affected box office. I do feel like I can see the efforts and the trials and the scariness in The Abyss, and that really ramps up as we get to the more intense moments later on. But I was a little bored up top.
Life is hard, but finding a really great podcast makes the days go by so much easier. Hi, my name is Blue Telusma. I'm a writer, an emotional intelligence coach, and the host of Humanize with Blue Telusma, a podcast where we believe that when you humanize everyone in the room, a great conversation is almost guaranteed. Join us every week here on Electricast as me and my guest co-hosts unpack big topics and interview even bigger personalities with a sense of humor and a dash of mischief. If you're looking for a new best friend in your head, we've got you covered. Electricast.
There's some really funny moments up top and early on. You get the dynamic between Bud and Mrs. Brigman, and the funny moment with the ring in the toilet, and the blue hand that follows him for the rest of the movie. Like, all that stuff is, I think, pretty essential for setting up what eventually pays off. I mean, it would be one thing if it didn't pay off. It would be one thing if this movie was 3 hours. But at 2 hours and 20 minutes, considering the depth, get it? Depth and breadth of the story. And breadth of the story that they cover, it seems justified. Now, what I don't know is if the alien subplot was really necessary.
I mean... What's The Abyss about? The Abyss is about them going down into this abyss and discovering alien life or making contact with alien life. And we can't reveal the alien until later. You tell me, please, what is the first hour and a half of The Abyss about?
Before the introduction of the alien species.
Right. What are we doing?
It's the mission, right? And there's the storm, and there's the collapse of the surface infrastructure, and they just get deeper and deeper into it.
But they're going down, they're trying to salvage the warheads, right?
Well, that is that's the SEAL team's secret objective. The surface objective is for the rig crew, whom are the closest to the submarine wreckage, to go in and see if there are survivors. Rescue any survivors. So it's a rescue mission with a secret military objective.
Alien.
that goes right. Basically, yeah, it's alien.
I'm not sure that the aliens, while they came in to save the crew, I don't know, to your point, if they saved the movie. Was it necessary? Did it pay off? Unfortunately, continues to be, for me, the most dated aspect of the movie.
Yeah.
They were kind of cute and they were nice to them, but I didn't get a sense of connection with the alien.
Maybe we could suggest that the aliens in the abyss intentionally sunk the submarine. Were they trying to mess with the submarine because it was carrying the nuclear warhead and to interfere with whatever their mission was, presumably to blow something up?
Are we allowing them that prescience? Are they environmentalists? Are they trying to save the humanity with whom they've had no contact from nuclear annihilation, or I guess themselves?
I mean, I guess. I mean, it seems like they were definitely a part of the inciting incident, and then they have a message to deliver at the end. So it seems like they have to be correlated a little bit. Well, you ask what the abyss is about, and I think that the aliens are essential to the ultimate message that James Cameron wants to deliver, and that is facing the abyss of life and its many manifestations. Like it's a very deep thing, but the abyss is the depth and the extent of the ocean. The abyss is the eternal darkness or area to explore within us. And the abyss is the eternal darkness of death. There's a lot of deep stuff going on here. I'm not saying that it's necessary for James Cameron's movie to succeed. What I'm saying is I think that's what he was ultimately going for and why maybe the aliens are necessary.
Man, that is forgiving. You were exactly the person he was aiming for with Avatar. Because here's how invested I was in this. They set up a lot of stuff and I paid attention. I did remember some things from when I had first seen this movie. But I was like, here we go. Now there's the main fight starts, the main conflict. They have that slow underwater chase in the submersible pods. And I was like, woo! And then then they did the Mufasa thing at the edge of the cliff with him, and he was like, no. And then get it, the pressure got to him. The pressure was too much for Michael Biehn. And then it was over and he was dead. And I was like, yay, they totally won. That's cool. So that thing with the rat, when the breathing underwater, the pink rat fluid thing, right? They set that up and they never used it in the movie. And Kelly was like, no, that's coming. with the aliens. And I was like, what? There's more? And then there was like another 45 minutes of going to get the warheads and meeting the aliens and him being in the rat pink goo helmet. And
in the amniotic fluid.
Talk about tact. I'm not tacked on because it was important. But I honestly was like at a place where the James Cameron movie ended for me. And then there was all this alien stuff. And I was like, it feels like a different movie.
Yes. And that's what I'm saying. When the aliens really start taking shape, you're like, what? Like, what is going on here? And maybe that was intentional so that we're kind of in the same experience with the crew. But I was definitely like, whoa, this is getting really weird really fast. And then he's in that air chamber, fathoms under the sea, and he sees all this weird video, and he's talking to them and like talking back to them. And then he emerges all triumphant and decompressed at the end.
Yep.
And it was like, whoa.
And we're going to see these elements again moving forward. The understanding is that, slight spoiler, Avatar 2 will feature the underwater portion of Pandora, or possibly other planets nearby that we hadn't seen before. This is a James Cameron movie, and it echoes the themes of any and all of the other movies, possible exception of True Lies. It feels so James Cameron. In a way, I kind of expected more based on that alone. And The Abyss was fine, but there was a reason, as we've discussed with other movies, that I hadn't seen it in like 20 years and didn't remember all that much about it.
I mean, a big movie for its time, I think $45+ million budget, did garner at least one Academy Award, I think, for visual effects. And most importantly, the primer for James Cameron as a filmmaker. This is where he met the visual effects team that was able to bring the magic to the screen for Terminator 2. And so a necessary step in the James Cameron evolution, maybe not as much of a leap for cinema in general, but kind of, actiony and cerebral in a way that most movies don't aspire to, let alone achieve.
It's a little bit like John Carpenter's The Fog, in that, for me, it's the least seen movie. I mean, it came after Aliens and right before Terminator 2, which really solidified him as an undeniable success. One, it can be argued that Aliens traded on the success of Alien, and Terminator was a big deal, but Terminator 2 really solidified him. So maybe this is the last gasp of James Cameron trying to find his voice, and it is all there. It doesn't drive me in the same way that some of his other films do, but it's definitely interesting to hear the story, particularly of how troubled this production was. It's kind of akin to Steven Spielberg thinking that Jaws was going to sink his career. He would never make a movie on the water again and wasn't sure how it was going to turn out. Francis Ford Coppola and Apocalypse Now could not have been more difficult on set, where he contemplated suicide and all these things, and he thought it was going to ruin him forever. I'm not sure that James Cameron felt that way, but definitely a beleaguered production that didn't inspire a lot of loyalty from a lot of the cast members, even if he did so later on, maybe when he got his footing and really got some of the respect and authority, I guess, he deserved after the success of Terminator 2.
Yeah, you can't fault James Cameron, or you can't say that James Cameron doesn't have ambition and that he follows that through in a way that results in some pretty spectacular filmmaking. And not to discredit the kind of the abuse that maybe some of his actors and crew endure on set. Like, that's not cool, and I think people are really being called to account for that kind of behavior in Hollywood. But he's not on the wrong side, or hasn't been called out for the Me Too stuff or for the overt and outright assault and abuse on sets. I don't know. But I think that the magic of James Cameron is that he brings such a personal and vested interest to his films for our delight and our entertainment. Like, I'm a scuba diver, and this has a general interest to me, and it's amazing to see the spectacle that he creates underwater, even if it's fictionalized. It's crazy to me that this technology that he displays, the amniotic fluid, or what's it called, the oxygenated fluorocarbon that he uses, like that's a real technology that he previewed in like a class demonstration when he was like in junior high or high school. Like, that was something that blew his mind and that stuck with him. and that he worked into a narrative to kind of bring, I don't know, visibility and light to it. Like the fact that what the rat experienced was an actual experimentation, probably questionable in terms of, American humane, but it really worked. It really happened. And that's insane. And we saw it on film.
Yeah, the rat is a perfect example of probably the making and experience of the abyss. He was going to do it. It was going to be real. It was going to be genuine and honest. And it was all in service of the movie. That rat was actually put into the oxygenated fluorocarbon and actually had to breathe it. And they got it all on film. And the only reason they cut away to the actors watching or being afraid for the rat was because on camera, when that happened, the rat freaked out and crapped all over the place. And they had to cut away from it. And I think that however actors freak out and crap all over themselves, James Cameron is going to get his movie made. And
he's going to get the shot.
And we can say that he was right. Like, look, we're not promoting abuse or anything like that. But if we've come to understand anything, it's that you have to trust in James Cameron's vision, I guess. If you get in the way, it will likely be a lesser movie. And if your feelings are hurt, he doesn't necessarily care, and he's going to get it done. Within, I suppose, reasonable limits, because he breathed the stuff himself in the movie and I think in real life, and knew that the rat wouldn't come to harm. He's just going to put it through its paces if it's going to be the star of his movie.
I mean, I was watching that scene and I was like, wow, how did they do that? That looked really real. No, they drowned the rat.
I hope that Ed Harris just had a little bit of Kool-Aid thrown into the water and that he had like a flush valve or something, because I hope that they didn't make him breathe that stuff in the scene, for any amount of time.
I mean, I just assumed that there was a second layer to his helmet.
Well, that would be clever.
And they just filled up that front layer. I was looking for his eyebrows to see if his eyebrow hair moved. I mean, that would be a simple special effect for them to have done for Ed Harris. I would say that The Abyss is a good movie, and that despite being released 30 years ago, it really holds up. I'm not compelled to watch it again or to keep it on any lists or whatever, but I think just an important but kind of forgotten film.
Yep.
And so ultimately, what is your rating?
As happens with a lot of movies that I don't necessarily love, but have a real place in cinema history, it was just as interesting to read about the stuff that happened behind the scenes that informed the stories, because it did get intense and I was compelled and I was very invested in the slow chase across the ocean and all the yelling and stuff. But the rest of it seemed almost James Cameron routine. It's like if you made a movie, if you went to James Cameron summer camp, filmmaking summer camp, and they put you in a rig and you shot a movie, maybe someone would come up with The Abyss. But it was fine. And so I like the ancillary stuff. I think that as production stands, it's akin to another gigantic water movie like Waterworld, where it's so much happened behind the scenes, it almost propels the movie through the ages, in part because of its backstory as well. I mean, I give The Abyss it was fine. It was all right.
An important film that kind of got left behind.
It suffered from the curve.
We get Titanic water stunts and action. We get Terminator 2 CG human effects. We get, Avatar glowy stuff. And we get Cameron's signature character dynamics and humor from True Lies, all in The Abyss. So an important film to recognize when discussing James Cameron's body of work, as we are doing in James Cameron Month 2022 here on Or Whatever Movies. So you got a good from Iris and all right from Wes. That's our review on The Abyss. Let us know what you think on social media at Or Whatever Movies on Instagram, or whatevermovies.com is where you can find several other James Cameron related podcasts, as well as another 150 movie reviews from Iris and Wes. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Have you ever wondered what actually happens in Congress every day? Stay informed on Capitol Hill's daily happenings with a concise, factual summary of the Senate and House of Representatives' activities from the previous session, free from bias, on the Congressional Record Daily Digest podcast. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and discover the process from the heart of U.S. politics. The Congressional Record Daily Digest, an Electricast production.
Electricast.
Are you passionate about saving the planet for future generations? Do you want to learn how to do it? If yes, then you need to tune in to the Nature Backed podcast. It's a talk show covering the changing world around us, from renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, circular economy, to ESG and social innovation. Don't miss this opportunity to discover how you can join the movement and make a difference. Subscribe to the Nature Backed podcast today on your favorite platform and get ready to be amazed.
Electric acid.